Welcome to The Real Life Buyer. In this podcast, you will discover interviews with procurement and technical experts, business owners, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. These experts will help you to develop and grow, accelerate your career, improve your business, save money, and buy smart. Now introducing The Real Life Buyer, Dave Barr.
Hello, and welcome to The Real Life Buyer. My next guest is Jeff Cohen, the author of Countable, a practical guide to lift, shift, and empower you and your team. Now, Jeff has described his former self, and I quote, "I was everything that a leader shouldn't be: cocky, arrogant, inconsiderate, and the list goes on. Needless to say, I was a crappy boss that no one wanted to work with." It was this realization that drove Jeff to focus on being accountable for himself, which eventually led to his book, Countable. Jeff has started multiple companies and has grown a software company from nothing to 20 million in revenue. So today I welcome Jeff onto the podcast to discuss his book and the benefits business leaders may gain from redefining and realigning the matter of accountability in their organizations. So without further ado, I welcome Jeff onto the podcast. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, David. It's great to see you. Thanks so much for having me today.
You're most welcome. And firstly, let me say congratulations on your book that launched on Tuesday, the 14th of June, I believe.
It sure did. Yeah, thank you. We launched in the number one position for new books in the business categories we were in, and it was really heartening to see the momentum like from day one, right there.
Superb. No, it's great to hear something doing so well. So again, congratulations on that success, and may it continue for some time.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's give some of my listeners some perspective. Perhaps you can explain some of your personal and career highlights that became the driving force to create your book.
So, first off, I just want to say to everybody, I'm really grateful today. And Dave, thank you for bringing up all of the things I've said about myself, so I don't have to say I was a crappy boss, or I treated people poorly, or I was cocky, or whatever that was, right? But really, that's what occurs. Like, people get successful, and success just gets them thinking, oh my gosh, I am just what everybody wants. This is the greatest thing. And guess what? That success can be fleeting very quickly, and it's very humbling when it does. And it's not always something in your control. But in my case, I'd grown an 8-figure software company. We had tremendous momentum at the time. The market was right for what we were doing around agile software development. And I learned actually so many things about operating a business from what we did for Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies. And I wasn't one of the consultants. Like, we had these brainiac dudes and ladies that did amazing work with our clients to help get them so that they could implement a development process that was very complex, had a lot of dependencies. And what I learned is that the integrity of that process is super, super important. And as I kept going in my business career and starting other companies and then going back to work at IBM and working with other large companies, what I noticed was the integrity of the business operation was often out. Now, a lot of people hear that word integrity like it's either good or it's bad. For me, what it is it's more about workability. For example, if you're going to cross a bridge and in the middle of the bridge, there's a big crack, the integrity of that bridge is out. And yes, that's a bad thing.
Just a little bit.
Right? But just imagine, like, you're going someplace in your life today. And whether it's being late to a meeting or always being late to a meeting, or making promises to people and then forgetting about them, or committing to make something happen or not make something happen, there's the question of workability around it. And we could talk more about this, but as I look at my career and I look at where I've come from, the integrity in a lot of areas of my life was just out. And until you notice that, and until you work to bring that integrity back in, it's difficult at best. to have a life where people know they can count on you. In fact, they're probably always questioning it.
Yeah. And it's not always clear whether people have that integrity. You mentioned the crack on the bridge. A crack is very obvious to see. It's a little bit more difficult to see that in other people. And so you're having to take things quite often on face value, aren't you?
Well, you do. And here's the real thing about it. Most people want to look good. But until you're willing to look bad, no one's going to really believe and trust you. Yep. Part of what you talked about, the stories I tell that are all about the negative things that have happened in my life. Those are all stories that I tell, not because I revel in failure, but the success that comes out of what I learned in that failure. And, there are so many different sayings out there about failure and how it's a stepping stone for success. But I really personally believe that I could sit here and spend an hour telling you about all the great things I've done in my life, about all the successes I've had, about all the people that have benefited from what I do. And you learn something. It's when I tell people how I failed, how much it hurt, what the impact to my life and my family was, and then what I did when I came out of it. Like, what was the lesson or lessons that I was able to actually employ? People can connect to that because many people are going through some of those same things, or they might go through something like that in the future and they might remember, oh, wait, there was something that someone I heard does. And like the impact I want to have in the world is for people really to take my failures and turn them into their successes.
Yeah, and I've read your book, really loved it. It's very easy to digest. Lots of information, lots of short chapters, which, as said, you can take on board and relate to. And it's lots of personal experience in there. I think we all have a good story. And to know that someone's been honest with themselves, sharing that honesty and explained how they've overcome those issues and now are trying to help other people to avoid those pitfalls, I think is a fantastic thing to do.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And thanks for being one of my early readers.
As I said, I certainly recommend it to everybody. I've been flicking through it again today, obviously in preparation for our chat. And one of the things I picked up actually on, and I was also going through some of the social media, was that you've recently made a statement, and that was why accountability in the workplace is dead. Now, can you explain what you meant by that little statement? Why is accountability dead? Why do you believe that's the case?
Well, first off, we had this little thing called the pandemic. And most companies that are operating today from pre-pandemic mindset are missing the huge shift that has occurred inside of all of us. In fact, that's why we hear about the Great Resignation, right? People leaving their jobs, and they're leaving them because the job is not considering them. And so accountability in the workplace is dead because that's what most companies pre-2020 and pre-2015 focused on. And it wasn't just about accountability. It was about holding you accountable. It wasn't about saying, Dave, you're accountable for doing this podcast. And you saying, yes, I sure am. No, it was about, Dave, I'm going to hold you accountable for doing this podcast. That's got a whole different meaning. It almost feels like someone's putting a gun to your head, like I've got to do a podcast, But when you take that mindset and that's what you hold your people to, no one gets left feeling heard with the space to share. Like they feel restricted. And, there's an environment of negative attitudes that they hold people back, and they have people not tell the truth. Or if they're going to tell the truth, they're going to tell it, but they're going to take the long way around the mountain. So you're going to spend 20 or 30 minutes before you actually get to what you wanted. And I'm a master at that. When you trigger me, and I just, when I get triggered in just the right way, I promise I will tell you exactly what I was doing, exactly why I was doing it, why I prioritized your task to the bottom of the list. You will get all of that. and I won't let you out of the conversation for a half hour. Very, very good at that. Think about how many people we trigger every day. We do it because we're holding them accountable, and people don't do well being held accountable.
One of the tricks here is, rather than put people under this huge pressure, as you say, make them accountable, is to encourage and work with them so they feel they should be accountable. It's a self-imposed thing. I want to be accountable for this because I want to do X, Y, and Z, rather than being told they have to be. Is that one of the connotations we should consider?
Part of it, I would say that's on the way to where you want to be. I mean, let's face it, people don't like being managed. And when you manage them, they call you a micromanager. So if people don't like being managed, then how do you move away from that? Well, you move away from that by managing their promises, not their person.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a huge, huge difference when you do that. When you manage a promise, it's very empowering, because a promise is something now that if we know what you're good at, Dave, what your strengths are, and what you like doing, it's an easy promise to make.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to, do a podcast interview once a week. No problem, Dave. I get you love doing those. No problem, right? But when we hire people for a job, and then when we go to continually manage them, what happens is we often pile on. So, Dave, I know you got the podcast down. I really appreciate that. And listen, we need someone to do the laundry. Would you do that for us? Now, in a lot of environments, there are penalties for saying no to requests like that. And if you live in an environment where there are penalties, then, heck, you might as well be playing American hockey, right? Because, when you penalize an employee, you take them out of the game for anywhere from a day to a week. And this is business we're talking about. The object is to have a team of people that's engaged and active and good at doing what they do so they can deliver quality work. So the minute you start penalizing people, from that moment forward, you've now taken them out of the game and your productivity drops, and you don't even know it.
Yeah.
You don't even know it.
So it's interesting there. So should we say the culture of the company is one of the foundation blocks, would you say then? If the culture, as you said, makes people feel uncomfortable with saying when they're not happy about being accountable for something they're not good at, is, if you haven't got that right, then you really aren't a loser.
It's a great point. And yes, I think I make that in the book for sure. The culture of a company is a very fragile thing. Companies don't necessarily know what their core values are. So when they don't know what their core values are, they'll have a laundry list of 20 or 30 core values. Now, I don't know about you, Dave, but I have a hard time remembering 3. If you go to 5, some of them will sound familiar, right? You drill it into me enough times, okay, great. But when you have 20 or 30 core values, you're not creating a culture, you're creating a laundry list of things for people to remember.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you get people to operate with one of those values in mind if they're trying to figure out, what's relevant? So, I work a lot with companies to help them identify what their core values are, because those core values help to create a culture. But I'll venture to say one of the core values that every company has, from the CEO down, but it's not often stated: alignment. They want their people to be aligned. So whatever the CEO is saying, I would like our company to do this, that, or the other. Now the CEO wants all of their direct reports and all of the teams that report to those direct reports to be doing what it takes to be aligned. And let's face it, it's not always an easy thing to have alignment. And when you are missing alignment, David, do you know what the next thing that goes out is?
Okay, could hazard a guess, but no, please carry on.
Okay. Trust.
Okay, yes, see what you mean.
Yeah. Dave, I thought you were going to produce another podcast this week. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And, what happens is that the communication between people which is very, very impactful, does not come over to the other side like you care. It comes over like you're barking an order.
Right.
Right? I could have been curious and said, hey, Dave, did something happen this week that kept you from recording a podcast? Right?
Yeah.
And I didn't. How often do we do things like that to our people? The people we care so much about and want to leave them with the feeling like they're being hugged and loved, not that they're being pushed away and hit.
So kind of the method of asking the question, the tonality is part of the key then.
Well, tonality is very important, but also you could say to me, Jeff, why did you do that? In the sweetest voice. And I immediately will create a story that you're blaming me for something.
Sure.
And you're just trying to sugarcoat it. Like, people read through that stuff. And everybody has different triggers, right? For me, it's the word why. You read the book, so you know why.
Yeah.
But if you read chapter 1 called Grand Theft Auto, you'll learn about one of the longest running triggers I have in my life that I've brought with me to every job, to every relationship. And it's the word why. Now, it's funny. My wife is a master at using the word why. Like, she does it all the time. Instead of saying, hey, honey, where are we at with having the sprinklers fixed? She'll say, why aren't the sprinklers fixed? Now, I immediately get triggered. And because I wrote the book and because I'm very trained in communication, instead of just going down the path of wasting 20 minutes of her time, what I'll do now is I'll say, hey, honey, listen, you've triggered me. Can I have a few minutes to sort this out before we talk? Or can we talk about it another time? And boy, I'm telling you, the things I do in business that now I bring to my personal life, like that, have made an enormous impact in my relationships and the ability for my wife and I to be foster parents. We have a beautiful 15-month-old daughter right now who is just like that close to walking.
Wow.
And it's so rewarding. But, I don't ask her why she's not walking yet.
Yeah. So it's quite difficult, isn't it? And you think about this, as you say, why can be quite accusatory in some respects.
Well, there's a lot of things that could be. It's not always, but, we will interpret things from wherever our mind is at the time, or whatever our natural inclination to the interpretation is. So, yeah, I mean, we are human beings. We are not immune from that condition. The human condition is just that. And look, we can embrace it or we can fight it. Fighting it does us no good. And when you have employees, if you have a couple of hundred employees in your company, and it all starts at the top and you're the leader, right? Now, you can either be a boss, which has a negative connotation, right? Most people, hey, I read a great book on how to be a great boss. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I don't want to be a great boss. I want to be like, I'm trying to figure like, what's the word when you empower people, right? What's the word that people want to use about you when you're living your truth and you're empowering people to take action, and your leadership just shines through. Like, they want to be on your team. They want to follow that. They want to be like you, and they emulate what you do. And if anybody runs a company with employees and doesn't think that their team wants to look up and potentially mimic some of the traits that you show as a leader, you're definitely missing something, because it's a huge opportunity for you to ingrain the goodness that you have for the world in your people.
Yeah. Also, if you're not behaving in the way that people perceive a leader should be, they'll often mimic the bad things as well, the behaviors that aren't appropriate.
Oh my gosh, that is such a poignant statement, Dave. Yes. If you are a schmuck and you treat people poorly, here's what it is. You ready? You're going to love this. You remember that old saying, you come home from work and you're all ticked off, so you kick the dog?
Yeah.
That's your first line manager. You know what your first line manager does? Kicks the cat. You know what your second line manager does? Kicks the mouse. That's how it goes.
Yep.
You kick the dog kicks the cat kicks the mouse, whatever the mouse wants to kick, it'll kick. It just keeps going downhill.
Yep.
And so it doesn't pay to be like that. And yeah, we all have times we get frustrated, we get upset, things didn't go our way. When we communicate from emotion, we're eliminating the number one thing that we can do that will drive our company's success. And that is have a communication that's heard.
Yeah, that's good. And that's one of the things, I'm glad you touched on that. Communication becoming quite difficult. It's becoming affected by things like technology and the cacophony of disruption that everybody is experiencing at the moment is distracting our attention kind of more and more. And that, for me, results in people not listening, or if anything, being distracted enough purposely not to listen. So you suggest that effective communication is knowing when you say something to a person and they hear you and fully understand. So I'm sure you've got some great tools and behaviors that you can suggest that help to ensure people do listen and understand and not just hear. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, first off, you took the definition of effective communication almost all the way. So close, because it's not just them saying that they understood. It's you actually, when there's something important, I'm going to just share a little story with you because it's about my personal life, but I want everyone to know this happens in business. And if you treat people in business the way that I tell you I treated this 7-year-old, people will just love you. They will want to be with you. You will have the most loyal team, and they will brag about you to your customers, and your customers will want to stay with you. Like, this all rolls downhill. The number one thing we care about in a business is being able to have the security of a growing business that makes profit. Let me tell you something. If you want that, it starts with your people. So there I was with my daughter. She was about a year old at the time. And we went down to some friends to visit and stay at their house. And they have a 7-year-old girl, beautiful little girl. Love this girl. And my wife and her friend were going to an event. My friend and I took the girls in a little wagon out to dinner. We walked maybe 4 or 5 blocks. It was a great adventure. The 7-year-old was mommying the 1-year-old. It was perfect. We get to dinner. We have a great dinner. And then we're going to frozen yogurt afterwards. We hop back in the wagon. I figured everything was great on the way there. So I stood in the front with my friend while he was pulling. And we were talking, and a half a block later, we're pulling up to the frozen yogurt shop. And I turn my head and I see my daughter standing there in the wagon, holding the side with just tears running down her face, crying. And my heart broke a little. And I was emotional. Anyway, I had my friend stop, and I picked up my daughter and I gave her a hug and I comforted her. And then I put her back in the wagon. And I turned to the 7-year-old and I said, "Hey, honey, I'm just curious. Did you see that she was standing and that she was crying?" And she said to me, "Yeah, I told you." I said, "Oh, I didn't hear you." I said, "Can I ask you a favor?" "What?" "Could you make sure that I answer you the next time you tell me something, especially if it's about my daughter?" She said, "The 2 words that we use all the time. We know and love these 2 words, so our children use them now also." She said, "Got it." And then tilted her head back down and started playing her video game again. Now, most of us would leave it right there, but I didn't know that she actually got it.
Mm-hmm.
What I know is that she was playing her video game, and that was her desire. So it was likely during that conversation, she was thinking, when is he going to finish so I can play my game some more?
Indeed, yeah.
So I said to her, not to be a schmuck or anything, but I needed to know. I said, "Hey, honey, I'm just curious. What'd you get?" And she stopped moving her fingers and was still looking down. And in that position for about 15 seconds, an eternity for a question like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
And then she lifted her head up and she said to me, "You want to make sure that I hear you answer me if I call out to you?" And I said, "Yes, I would be so grateful if you do that." Now, I knew the likelihood of the message staying with her was good. But about 6 weeks later, we went back and stayed with them again. And she wanted to play with my daughter and her friends. And so I said to her, I said, hey, honey, remember in the wagon, that conversation we had? She goes, oh, you mean the one where you want to make sure that if something comes up, I need to make sure you answer me? And my heart melted. It stuck. What if we did that at work?
Yeah, yeah. That's a sort of ensuring that people reinforce their understanding by repeating back to you their interpretation of your words in some respect.
Yeah, and also it's great if they get your commitment, but at a minimum, you hear that they actually adopted what you said. It became a thought pattern in their head.
Yeah, yeah.
That they were able to do something with.
That blends quite well with another statement I saw in your book when you refer to the trust alignment framework. And when it's in action and working, you say you have people in sync and delivering on, for example, the CEO's goals. And I think that's really important, this trust alignment framework. Can you share a few words on that?
Absolutely. As I was writing the book, it came to me that we all operate from having certain things. And what makes the difference in what we have is that we know. And so, I talked about alignment, I talked about trust, and I noticed that those two things exist as separate entities. For trust, you need to have some shared values with your team. And you need to know the ability of the resources on your team. And then you're able to develop trust if the values and the abilities are communicated effectively. We actually have some software that we're writing right now that will help that just show up as a function of what you do every week. And then there's the alignment framework, which says, hey, look, a leader has a vision. Out of that vision, there are priorities and there are actions to take. And then if you have communicated effectively, then it's possible that you could have alignment. Now, most people, when they communicate, they're usually communicating from their heart, right? So there's some kind of emotional response. It's not well thought out always. It's whatever that is. But the issue is that you're not always thinking about the outcome that you want, right? And so the framework notices that the outcome at the very outer circle is what you want, but you have to actually go all the way to the outermost point before you start communicating. Because if you don't know what you want and you just communicate, first off, you'll never get it. But if you know what you want and you communicate from an emotional state, rather from a state where you've thought through what you want, then it's highly unlikely that you'll have the outcome occur. I have a client, he's amazing. And he's a doctor and he deals with doctors. When I first started working with him a couple of years ago, he would be really, really frustrated with these doctors. And I'm like, okay, so what's happening when that happens? He goes, well, I stopped doing business with them. I'm like, dude, you're looking for people to train and develop on this system that you have. You want it to be a global impact because of what it does for people's pain. And your delivery system are doctors. Why are you firing them? And then I said to him the thing that changed his life. I said, you have two ends of the spectrum that you can operate from. One end, you can be right. Of course, you are right and you know you're right, but being right with other people, that's a different situation entirely, right? Or you can get what you want. But I promise, being right and getting what you want, they never come together. So when you see that you want to be right, stop. Whomever you're talking to, say, can I call you back? And call me. I got one of those calls where he said, I was being right. I know I was going to destroy the relationship. So I told him I would call him back. Help me off the ledge, Jeff.
Yeah, yeah.
And now I get calls from him where he says, you're not going to believe this. I caught myself again. And He's building this amazing team. His program is now a doctoral program at a university that he developed. I mean, it's like he's enrolling people in what he's doing and his game like never before. And a lot of that just has to do with he stopped worrying about being right.
Yeah. There's also a key message in there as well. He started to recognize when he was, as you say, going out of his own alignment, he realized, hold on a minute, I've got to stop here because I'm going too far. I'm getting it wrong. And you've helped him visualize that moment when he's going to say, hey, give myself a break, step away from this a second and reapply. And the more he does that, the less likely, I guess, that he'll make the mistake of going too far.
Well, it definitely occurs with a lower frequency.
Yeah.
Right. This is a guy that is an emotional person.
Yeah.
Right. And let me just tell you, we're all emotional people. We just all cover it differently. Right. When he gets emotional, he gets a lot more outspoken. Some people go inward. But in whatever the case is, if you're going to be right and keep it inside, what happens is you just kill people off and they have no idea why, they're no longer in your inner circle. So, this concept of being right or getting what you want, it is if people learn nothing else from me but that, they will outpace the greatest success that they have ever had in their life by miles, by leaps and bounds, simply because it comes back to, can you have a little humility?
So something I'm quite intrigued about. I'd like to understand your perspective on this, particularly in large organizations. Leaders come up with ideas, visions, goals for the business, and that has to cascade down from the very top to the very bottom. And quite often, we're talking about effective communication, the message, where it starts from, the interpretation, the understanding is quite often very different when it gets to the bottom of the organization. Those people actually doing the doing, shall we say.
Yeah.
And how in that instance, on a large organization where you may have facilities around the world, you may have 1,000 employees, how do you instill the count-onable culture in a business of that magnitude to make sure the message at the very top is the same message and it's believed in and people engage with it at the bottom?
So it's, first off, thank you. That's a great question, because I've worked with organizations. I worked at IBM. We had 400,000 people. I saw how things went there. I was 18, levels away from the CEO of the company. Like that is an enormous, gap. And then, I've worked in medium size and small size. I've worked with about 300 companies in the last 20 years. And in that period, what I've noticed is it all starts with a game plan that the leader in the organization has. And what they're trying to do, and I use the word trying very purposefully because they really are trying, is they're trying to get their vision to be adopted. So they think, I'm going to create this neat little PowerPoint presentation and I'm going to present it and people are just going to absorb it and do it. People learn a lot of different ways, but the number one way people learn is by acting, is by actually taking actions. So what I did in the Count-Onable program, which is a process I'm patenting right now, and also, by the way, in the book, it is fully broken out. So it's like open sourced. Anybody can implement it themselves, whether it's a Fortune 500 company or a mom and pop on the corner. You can do this program, but it all starts with the leader. So whether you're 1,000 people, 100 people, or 10 people, if your CEO can be vulnerable and be able to say, look, I screwed up. I'm sorry. It was my mistake, mea culpa, right? We now have to fix it. And people rally around that. And then there's a safe environment for their direct reports to do the same thing without worrying about, am I going to get fired this week? Or am I going to get this or that or the other? We create politics in our organizations. It doesn't naturally come with an organization. But when you can have open, honest, straightforward communication between everybody, and that doesn't mean that everybody knows everything that's happening all the time, because first off, it's not practical. And also, it's probably not wise, for them to know certain things anyway.
Sure.
Like it doesn't do anything to help their job or diminish their job when you're running an organization and you have strategic decision-making to do about how you structure and operate your organization. But it's a very simple process. And like I said, we're in beta with our software right now to manage that process. And it all starts with having a good vision, not for 10 years. Like that's a dream. Whatever you're going to be in 10 years, that's just a dream. But a vision starts with what you see that you can have in 1 to 3 years. Some people have a hard time thinking 3 years out, but they can think about what they want next year, right? And then you identify, well, what will I do this quarter in this 90-day period that will substantially move me in that direction? And then you unfold that. And there's a great story about the unfolding of milestones because the way I do it is very empowering for leadership and the team. And, in the book, I love the chapter about that. My editor really enhanced the story. And I really have to give, credit to Kellen for this because he said, Jeff, what you just create is amazing. I see James Bond. I see him hopping on the scaffolding of a window washer scaffolding and racing to the top of the building. Like, yes, that's what people want. They want it to happen fast, but they also want to be able to have a clear view of where they want to go. And then once you've got that clear view, it's really easy to say, well, if I'm going to be at the beach, in 3 hours, then I'm going to be passing this city in 2 hours, and I'm going to be passing that city in 1 hour, and I better have all my stuff packed by noon, right?
Yep.
And it's very methodical about how you do it, but very easy. And then what happens is you wind up with milestones that are reachable or stretch, and then you look back every month and you start saying, oh my gosh, we were way too aggressive about that milestone. We said we were going to do 1,000. We only did 100. Well, now you have to look. Did I have enough resources? Was there enough money? Were the people, prepared on the team to do what needed to be done? And you get to start taking the brainstorming you did that came up with this brilliant idea and refining it. Now, you don't have to wait another 90 days to see that there's some revision to make, because you're doing it within 30. And that's the real magic to a large enterprise or small one, being able to be countable. It's about, the great little joke about how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? You've got to do that. You've got to know where you want to be, have other people create a game plan based on where you said you want to be, align the leaders' direct reports and all of their game plans so that sales and marketing and HR and finance and legal are all on the same page, and they look at each other's milestones and they say, oh, that supports me. Oh, that supports you. And you do that quarterly, right? And every month you have someone like a coach that's working with each of the leaders. So first off, it gives them a safe space where they can air their frustrations, where they have them, or brainstorm solutions. And it also gives them the ability to have someone that's connecting all of the dots. And when they see that there's something out, can actually affect that. Because the way it goes today, Dave, is you've got a leader saying, this is what I want. And then you have every one of those managers saying, okay, this is what our leader wants. Now let's go do it. But they don't always have the priority actions that map to the priority milestones. And that's what being countable gives a company, the ability to map the milestones to the actions, track the actions, and ensure that you're assigning the right action to the right person at the right time. And when you do that, your company is unstoppable.
Excellent. Excellent. It's a perfect moment now, just for the audience. Now we're getting close to the end. Where can people find about yourself, your book, the services, your coaching, everything like that?
Oh, thank you so much for that layup. So here's the book. It's Countable, right? And it's on Amazon.com. You can find it there. The thing about my name, Jeff Cohen, is there's about 2 million of us in the world. I don't know why my parents decided to give me one of the most popular names other than for me to have anonymity. It's times like this when you need something to hook yourself in order to find me. So that would be the word Countonable. So I have countonable.com, and that's COUNTONABLE.com. And on the website, you can download the first chapter of the book, and you'll read Grand Theft Auto and say, oh, now I get that car thievery thing that Jeff did. You can download all of the documents that are used in managing a Countonable company. And you probably want to do that while you're reading the book, because, the book gives them to you, but then you can make notes yourself on them. You can recreate them. You can do whatever you like with those. The graphics for the trust alignment framework are there. I think that's something like I keep that near and dear all the time, because I always think back, okay, well, what else do I want there? And then, if you're really intrigued by this and you want to take a couple of minutes and meet me or someone on my team and learn a little more and see, is this something that I might want to, jump in and potentially do? I've got a link there. You can put some time on my calendar or someone on our team's calendar, and we will spend a few minutes with you, get to know you. And, if you are the kind of organization that knows that having support makes a big difference, we'll support you.
That's brilliant. That's really good. I think I'll just finish off by saying, as I have read this book, we have barely, and I emphasize barely, scratched the surface of all the information that's available, all the teachings that's in this book. There's a huge wealth. All of the listeners must take note. There's a huge wealth of information here that I honestly say it's well worth your time to invest in this book and take some time learning about the things that Jeff's put his effort into sharing with you today. So Jeff, we're on We're out of time now. Been brilliant talking to you. I'd like to thank you very much for just giving us a taste of what you're sharing with the world now.
Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'd like to leave everybody with just one thought. Stop being just accountable. Be Countonable.
Brilliant. Thanks then. Take care, Jeff.
Thank you, Dave.
So there's another Real Life Buyer podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it and it's given you some ideas and inspiration for greater action and achievement. If you are a purchasing or a supply chain professional, business owner or director, come and join my Facebook group, the Purchasing and Supply Chain Community Hub, a safe place to engage with like-minded, friendly people. See you soon. Bye.